Well, now to the historic decision from the International Court of Justice. A majority of the 17 judges from the UN's top court calling for Israel to prevent genocide in Gaza, preserve evidence and submit a report within a month on all the measures taken in response to the court's order. As Melissa Bell reports, it stopped short of calling for a ceasefire.
In the court's view, at least some of the acts and omissions alleged by South Africa to have been committed by Israel in Gaza appear to be capable of falling within the provisions of the Convention.
The world's top court declaring that it will move forward with South Africa's case against Israel, in which Israel is accused of violating the 1948 Genocide Convention with its military response in Gaza after the October 7th Hamas attacks.
The Palestinians appear to constitute a distinct national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, and hence a protected group within the meaning of Article 2 of the Genocide Convention.
Created in response to the Second World War, the International Court of Justice is the judicial backbone of the United Nations. Its judges now ruling that it does have jurisdiction over the case and issuing emergency measures on Friday, but stopping short of calling for a ceasefire.
Israel must take measures within its power to prevent and punish the direct and public incitement to commit genocide in relation to the members of the Palestinian group in the Gaza Strip. The court further considers that Israel must ensure with immediate effect that its military forces do not commit any of the aforementioned acts.
Among the provisional measures, the court ruling that Netanyahu needs to ensure that humanitarian aid can enter the Strip. A ruling desperately needed by a population that's been pushed past the brink of starvation, their homes further reduced to rubble with every passing hour.
There's no safe area. Where shall we go? Stop the war. It is enough. We are drained. Everyone is drained. Children are gone. Adults are gone. Everyone is gone, and the world is watching.
What the world was watching this Friday was what was going to come from this court. And whilst the case here could last for years, this initial ruling is considered significant, even if it falls slightly short of what South Africa had been hoping for.
In exercising the order, there would have to be a ceasefire. Without it, the order doesn't actually work.
It feels like a victory and a significant milestone and a step in the right direction in the liberation of the Palestinian people. In a way, it is also very disappointing that the court did not rule in favor for an immediate ceasefire at this time.
And yet, the pressure on Israel now undeniable. As the UN's top court rules that it is plausible that genocidal acts are being committed in Gaza and that must stop. Melissa Bell, CNN, The Hague.
Well, Israel and South Africa have both responded with neither entirely getting what they were asking for, though both are praising the ruling.
Israel's commitment to international law is unwavering. Equally unwavering is our sacred commitment to continue to defend our country and defend our people. Like every country, Israel has an inherent right to defend itself. The vile attempt to deny Israel this fundamental right is blatant discrimination against the Jewish state, and it was justly rejected. The charge of genocide leveled against Israel is not only false, it's outrageous, and decent people everywhere should reject it.
I live in hope that Israel will act in accord with the decisions and will show the court that it does take the court seriously. If it doesn't, what happens is we are opening up room for all to act with impunity against innocent people. And I certainly don't wish to live in a world like that.
Well, a final and binding ruling on the genocide claim could take the court years to determine, and in practice, the court has no way to enforce its verdicts. Well, joining me now is Michael Becker. He's a former associate legal officer for the World Court. He's now an assistant professor of international human rights law at Trinity College in Dublin. Good to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
So firstly, just could you further give us some explanation about this ruling by the International Court of Justice, why it is historic and what it calls for?
Right. So, well, any case brought at the ICJ invoking the Genocide Convention is significant, and it's of course significant that the court found that South Africa has put forward what is at least a plausible case. So it's really important to understand that what happened yesterday was not the court making any kind of determination about whether South Africa's claims based on the Genocide Convention have been proven. The court wasn't making any determinations about whether what's happening in Gaza constitutes genocide. This was forward-looking. This was about trying to prevent the situation from getting worse while this case can be heard. But I think it's really important to understand that we just heard from Prime Minister Netanyahu in the clip there that Israel views these claims relating to genocide as outrageous. But what the court was saying here yesterday was that those claims aren't outrageous. They at least have a plausible basis in fact and law, and the case can continue.
And of course, a majority of judges from the UN's top court agreed. What does that tell you?
I thought that was quite significant. What really struck me listening to the decision being read out yesterday was the court's emphasis on the scale of the humanitarian crisis. That's really where the court put the focus yesterday. It was very powerful, I think, to hear Judge Donoghue, the court's president, reading out some of these accounts from UN reports and other bodies on the ground. And I think that that really mattered to judges coming from a range of countries. Judges aren't there as representatives of the states that they come from, but we saw judges from the US, Russia, China, Germany, all agreeing with all of the majority. They were in the majority on every point of the court's decision. And even the judge that Israel was permitted to appoint to the court for the purpose of hearing this case ruled in favor of some of the measures that the court has now indicated against Israel. I think that's really important, in part, to diffuse some of these accusations that the court is somehow inherently biased against Israel, which just is not the case in my view.
Yeah, you make some interesting points there. But the ruling did fall short. It did not go so far as to call for a ceasefire. Why not?
I think that this order was just about as good as South Africa could have reasonably expected, because that call for a complete suspension of military operations was always going to be problematic, in part because, unlike some other cases, here we have an armed conflict where one of the parties to that conflict, Hamas, isn't a party to the case. They can't be a party to the case. And so this put the court in a almost impossible situation, in my view, of being asked to order a ceasefire when both parties that would be a party to that ceasefire aren't within its authority. Now, it's really interesting, I think, that we see these different interpretations of what the court has said emerging, and it really mirrors the fact that we have two completely different narratives out there about this entire case and this conflict in the first place. So South Africa's position has been, yes, the court didn't order a ceasefire, but in practice, it should be understood as a de facto ceasefire, because that's the only way that Israel will be able to meet its obligation to deliver humanitarian aid. Israel says, no, the court's just asking us to do what we already are supposed to be doing under the Genocide Convention, and our position is that we are completely in compliance with the Genocide Convention. I think the real way to read the court's decision is somewhere in between these two understandings, and that's that the court is directing Israel to show far greater restraint in the military campaign. That doesn't mean the operations have to completely stop, but the court and the world that is watching is going to expect Israel to find ways to moderate its approach in meaningful ways. And that's linked to that obligation to make sure that humanitarian assistance can start to get into Gaza in an effective way.
All right, we'll wait and see whether Israel does abide by the ruling and submit documents showing its efforts to prevent a genocide within the month. We appreciate your time today, Michael Becker. Thanks so much.
Thank you.